I know 100% better, and I'm still like, I'm going to have a perfect food bar, and when I'm done lifting, I'll have a muscle milk.
So what would better be?
Anything better? Eggs, fruit. For a while, my habit was like wake up in the morning, grab a piece of fruit, hit the road, perfect. Get here, have an epic food bar, perfect. Because there's a meat bar, having bison, fats built into the bison.
Yeah.
Having my apple, and I was like, perfect. Protein, carb, fat, on the road.
Yeah.
Instead, now I'm like, we don't have that stuff available, so we'll just make do.
Perfect bar. Works out. So this is funny. We're
Right.
the Evan and Andrew, instead of interrupting class for everyone or distracting anyone, we have to have a conversation in a quiet room full of anatomy posters. You know, just posterior abdominal wall type stuff.
I probably should have looked at that stuff before my test yesterday.
You could probably would have helped. I also like this weigh-in chart that like started apparently like 4 months ago and then just didn't get filled out anymore.
And apparently one of the people didn't want to weigh in at all.
No,
they just put
weigh-ins.
their name on the board and we're like, I'll do it once.
No weigh-ins at all. So we're doing a podcast.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool. I think it is a really cool idea so we can jam. You and I have interesting conversations all the time.
They're interesting to us at least.
Yeah, maybe everyone else will find it interesting, maybe not. But we go into topics all the time about squatting positions or technique or exercise, different energy domains and what's right, what's wrong. But then we also talk about stories of where you've been doing photo shoots at or different things that I've encountered along the way. And I think it'd be really cool to share it all.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be really cool to bring other people on here to share their stories as well once we have the opportunity to.
Yeah, for sure. So many people in the gym with cool, varied backgrounds, both in like their careers and professional habits and their fitness journeys and all sorts of different things, and just getting to bring people on and get a peek behind the curtain of their lives and hopefully connecting everyone a little bit better too, where sometimes you like see people in passing on a Saturday and now maybe you can be like, hey, I heard that story and I had a similar experience or whatever, you know, just helping people know more about each other.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we have so many cool, unique people that are part of our gym and part of our community that no one else really gets to know about them other than me.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, sure, sometimes they share their stories with other people. But for the most part, I'm like, oh, so-and-so does X, Y, and Z. And no one has any idea.
Yeah.
And this would be a really cool way to make people aware of that and being like, okay, I didn't know that Ryan sells real estate or Ant sells cars or you do videos.
Yeah.
They should know by now that you do videos. But, all the cool stuff that we do. Or like talking about like Jay with his background and all that kind of stuff. Like there's so many cool things and unique stuff to us that no one gets to know.
For sure.
And now it's our opportunity to share it.
Yeah, and maybe we can, I'm sure we'll get off topic and tip into other things as well, and, always stuff to talk about. So I feel like maybe the place to start is, like, we all know you, but I actually don't know that much of your story.
Sure.
Like, how did you end up here?
Okay, so my story, as a kid, I was not a very good academic person. I had never enjoyed school. There's actually a story in first grade that I hopped a fence and ran away from school. That's how much I disliked it right out of the gate. But what got me through school was sports. I really enjoyed sports. I really enjoyed training, and I've always had this weird thing where I like the training aspect almost as much as I like the sport itself.
Yeah.
Growing up, I was really fortunate that I got to grow up and watch my parents go to the gym as well. My mom had some serious back injuries from being a nurse for forever. So she had a personal trainer. She brings me into the gym with her. I'm watching her work out. It's similar to how I like having kids in the gym now.
Yeah.
Because I had that experience. And I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I like lifting weights. And then my grandfather at that point was really like, say late 80s, early 90s, was really big into like wrestling, like Macho Man, Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan. So I grew up watching these like giant human beings that were jacked. And I was like, so if I go to the gym, I can be like that big.
Yeah.
And I thought it was awesome. So I was like, okay. So I was like the weird 12-year-old kid that we'd go to like department stores and I would always find myself in like the exercise equipment section.
Yeah.
And I was like, can I get dumbbells? Can I get a barbell? And my parents were like, what is wrong with this kid?
So when and where is this?
That was in Lenox, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Probably we're talking about like early 90s.
Okay.
Early 90s. I actually can remember when I was 12 years old, so I was born in 85, so in 97. I got an easy curl bar.
Nice.
And I can remember laying down in the living room doing skull crushers and being like, I don't even know what this is, but this is awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was always into that. And then in high school, sports get more competitive. You have training seasons and off seasons. And I really liked outworking people. It was just part of my DNA of like, if I can outwork you in the off season, I'm going to beat you during the season.
Yeah.
And I got some weird satisfaction of like when the season started and people were dying in preseason that I wasn't dying. And that kind of like fueled my fire of watching people being like bent over, throwing up, and me being like, this is fun.
Yeah.
This is great.
What sports were you playing?
So I grew up, I played soccer, I downhill skied, cross country skied, and played baseball. I played baseball for the spring and summer. I really wanted to just play baseball. But my dad was really all about playing different sports. He's like, you're going to be a one-dimensional athlete. I don't want you to be a one-dimensional athlete. I want you to be able to be well-rounded. A saying he used a lot was, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, it's great advice, and it's the same advice I give all young athletes now of like, play a bunch of sports, be multidimensional. It'll pay off in the long run when you want to go play any sport, and you can. So I grew up playing sports. I think I started playing sports at like the age of 3. The standard like youth soccer, t-ball.
Yeah.
My brother and sister are a lot older than I am. So my sister's 11 years older than me. My brother's 12 years older than me. And my brother and sister were really good skiers. My brother was on the U.S. national team. So at a really young age, I was getting dragged out to ski mountains, bundled up, put in a sled, getting pulled around, eventually putting on skis. So skiing for me was like second nature. It almost kind of became my my daycare. My parents would buy me a season pass and be like, hey, we're going to drop you off at the mountain. Go ski all day.
Yeah.
So I really got into skiing. And the unique part about that is it really helps you develop balance and coordination and the willingness to take a risk. Like, hey, I'm going to go down this hill as fast as possible. And I'm going to race all of my buddies and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a kid, you're not super scared when you wipe out and you tumble and you'd have like a yard sale where your gloves and your hat and everything's like scattered all over. And you're like, oh, that was cool. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Whereas an adult, if I did that now, I'd be like, well, that's the day. Back it up. Let's go inside. We're
That's
going to have
my
a
week.
beer. I'm destroyed.
Yeah.
But as a kid, you're into that and you're like, this is cool. This
Yeah.
is great. So obviously I'm telling a long story that could be very short. I got to college. I went to Springfield College. I initially went there for PE. I did 2 years of PE there, so I got all my anatomy and physiology and all that kind of stuff out of the way. I played baseball my freshman year, and that was my first introduction to real strength and conditioning. We had a strength and conditioning coach. At the end of our season, he actually left Springfield and went and coached at the LA Dodgers. So we were fortunate enough to have a high level of strength and conditioning, a very structured program where I got the proper way to back squat and bench and power clean and see different programs develop. So that was really cool. My sophomore year, I played fall ball, decided that it wasn't for me, and I joined the rugby team. I played rugby for 4 years. I ended up going to college for 5 years. The rugby team was great. It's just as much of a party as it is a sport. But those guys like to bang weights too. We didn't have a strength coach, so we kind of became our own strength coaches. So it was up to us to get into the gym. And that was the time where the internet wasn't as popular as it is now. You weren't like Googling things. I don't even know if there was Google. That was 2003.
Yeah.
So I was like reading muscle and fitness magazines and being like, cool, this dude does this to hit legs. I'm going to hit legs.
Right.
I can actually still remember I saw a dude doing banded bench presses, and I was like, what is that? I mean, now I understand that that's accommodating resistance and you're working on speed and power. But this guy came from Ohio State, and he was doing his master's degree at Springfield, and I went up to him at the gym, and I was like, dude, what's that all about? And he's like, go on this website, order bands. This is how you're going to use them. Drive fast as you can the whole way through it, the whole deal. Mm-hmm. And I just kept digging deeper and digging deeper. So I was going to the gym 5 to 6 days a week, going to classes, partying, doing the whole deal. I got out of college, during college, I had an internship at Canyon Ranch, which introduced me to the whole other spectrum of fitness. So there was celebrities doing yoga or Pilates or some weight room stuff or water aerobics or all that kind of stuff. It's a good introduction there.
More like wellness.
Yeah, more health, wellness, and it was really cool because they had doctors on staff that would lecture every day. So I got to go to lectures and learn from some really cool doctors that were there. I got to do some VO2 max testing, get introduced to that kind of test of blood testing, and the whole scope of like what is wellness. Like wellness isn't just eating well and exercise, but there's some measurements to be done in that. I got out of college. And I was really fortunate. I met Kate when I was 19 years old. So everyone that's listening, Kate is my wife. We met at Springfield College. I was 19 when I graduated college. Her parents were nice enough to let me move into their home. So I lived down in Coventry, Connecticut with Kate's mom and dad for 2 years. While I was there, I was trying to figure out what am I going to do. Just trying to figure out my life. I was being a lifeguard. I was a certified lifeguard. So I was lifeguarding. And a job popped up. And I was also personal training at a Globo gym. So I was working landscape construction, lifeguarding, and doing some personal training on the side. The personal
Real meathead life coming out of college.
Yeah, it's great. It was awesome.
Just fit dude jobs.
Yeah, that was it. Be outside, do cool stuff. Don't have to wear a shirt.
Yeah.
But I quickly saw what like the Globo gym life was about. Like they only let me have half an hour personal training sessions. And they just rotated through. So you pretty much like came back up to the counter, grabbed the next person, hopped right into a next session, and just kept like rotating through that. And results weren't what it was all about. It was just about like, hey, get that person to pay us, give them a half an hour of your time, get them out of here. We don't care what you do with them. Never mind the fact that I didn't have any certifications. So I had 0 certifications. They were just like, you look like a fit dude. You look like you know what you're doing. Go work with these people.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, what? I'm no authority. I'm a 21, 22-year-old kid that they're like, yeah, train this lady. You don't know what you're doing. Maybe you'll blow her up. Maybe you won't, but who knows?
Yeah.
So I remember I was online looking for jobs, and I was like, what am I going to do? And I saw a job pop up for a company called MediFit. And MediFit was a corporate wellness position. So I applied for, I think it was called a health and wellness specialist. I got the job. It was located at MassMutual. So I was fortunate enough while I was there for 2 years. They brought in some cool specialty classes. So one of the specialty classes they brought in was a guy named Joe Robidoux who taught kettlebells. He was AKC and RKC certified. And I got really big into it. And I was like, these tools are awesome. I need to buy 1 or 2 kettlebells and I can do kettlebell swings and snatches and clean and jerks. And this is all I need. So I got really big into that. And because I got so big into it, MediFit was like, why are we paying this contractor to come in? We'll just have you run the class. So I was like, cool. So I started doing some more research in terms of what can I do in my classes? What can I bring into my classes to make it different? How do I keep people engaged? And that's actually where I found CrossFit. So I was online researching some stuff and came across CrossFit.com, and I was like, that's interesting. Let me try it out. I thought of myself as a very fit individual, and I don't remember the first workout I did. I know Murph was one of the first because I was like, that looks cool. I'll try that, and I got murdered, man.
Yeah.
It was your typical CrossFit story of I ran a mile on a treadmill, got off, partitioned it 10, 20, 30, 20 rounds. I was doing my pull-ups on a cable crossover machine in the basement of MassMutual.
Yeah.
Got back on the treadmill, running on a treadmill again, sweating all over the place, almost dying. And I got off of it and I was done and I was like, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, let's go. So I started implementing it with some personal training clients, and then I somewhat started a gym within the gym there. So every day I would send out an email to like 20 people. I'd be like, you guys want to lift out lunch? You guys want to lift out like 1 or so? So I'd have like 10 or 15 people come with me down in MassMutual. One of our members of the gym, Brandy, she was actually one of them.
Oh, wow.
So she is the OG of Romeo Athletics. She started with me right out of the gate, and we were just doing workouts. Again, my knowledge base wasn't huge at that point. I didn't know why CrossFit worked. I didn't know what CrossFit was, but I thought this is cool. But the part that I always, which is interesting because we still do it, I was like, I feel like I need to lift more. So I always had a strength bias. I was always lifting before I did conditioning because I was like, I don't want to stop benching. I don't want to stop squatting. I don't want to stop deadlifting. I always had that from being like that little kid of seeing those huge, strong people of being
Yeah.
like, I need to lift weights.
Yeah.
What do you mean we don't lift weights? Like, yeah, we lift them in wads, but I want to do more than that.
Yeah. When did that switch? Because I know we've talked about before, like when you were doing like cross country skiing and everything, like all these very aerobic activities and like power output. Like, were you lifting still back then, or was there like a point when you started rugby or something where you started like banging weights more? When did that start to slip in on you?
I was really fortunate in high school that our cross country team was really good. So we had a strength program that went with it. We were pretty much not expected, but someone expected to win the state championship every year, come in first or second.
Wow.
So going into it, it was like, hey, if you're going to participate on this team, we expect you to train year round. So we had a weight room at school that, I mean, if you look back at what our coaches were doing, it was all muscular endurance stuff, which pretty much fits the cross country skiing model of
Right.
like 10 to 20 reps, a lot of machines, but also some dumbbell stuff, some benching stuff, a lot of plyometric bounding, hill sprinting, which when I look back at that from an exercise physiology standpoint, I'm like, that's actually pretty on point for what we need to be doing. But yeah, I was banging weights then, but the focus, I was very driven by performance. And I always have been. So I was like, if I do this style of training, I'm doing better in races. I should continue doing this style of training.
Right.
And at that time, my brother skied for a little while at Dartmouth. So he had some influence in terms of like, hey, you need to be out roller skiing. You need to be out running more. You need to be doing X, Y, and Z. So I did put a lot of miles in. 10-mile runs weren't uncommon. I liked to hill run. I liked to mountain bike. I liked all of that kind of stuff. But I always enjoyed the weight room. I always enjoyed the banging weights.
Yeah.
So when I was at Mass Mutual, I was looking at the CrossFit website and I saw that they had a certification, and I wasn't making much money at all. I think like the starting pay there was like $21,000 a year. Something crazy like that, like just enough to live on when you're not even paying rent and living in someone's house for free, where you're like, this makes no sense.
Really loving that college degree at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Being like, I'm making $20,000 a year, but whatever. I like what I'm doing. I'm having fun with it. So what we did from that was, I remember MediFit offered me to pay half of my certification. So they're like, hey, we'll give you $500 if you want to get certified through CrossFit. And I was like, okay, I'll think about it. And I can remember sitting on Kate's bed with my laptop and being like, should I do this? I don't know, like $500 is a lot of money. I don't have any money. Like, should I pull the trigger? And I decided to pull the trigger, and we went forward with it, and we did it. Obviously, it went well. This was 2009. So I took my CrossFit Level 1 in June 2009. At that point, there wasn't even a test.
Yeah.
Like, you finished it, no test, you're done.
Yeah.
You get through the weekend, you survive the weekend, you're certified, which is cool. So we get through that, and I was getting a little burnt out of corporate fitness, and I was like, I don't know. I really want to do my own thing. I've never been a good rule follower. I've never been a great employee. I've always been more of like, I'm going to do it this way, and that's how I want to do it.
Yeah.
So I decided that I was going to open my own gym out of a one-car garage in my house in Enfield. And Fred will say, it's funny because you talk to Fred about it, and he's like, yeah, we used to get calls all the time at the police station about people running down the streets with sandbags and flipping tires in your road and stuff like that. They knew it was harmless, and I didn't even have the right zoning for it, and I was running a business out of my house.
Yeah.
And then, so another OG member that started with me in so she's been with me now for 10 years, Sarah Scarp. She's been with me. She started in November of 2009 at my house at 3 Martin Terrace in Enfield, Connecticut. I don't no longer live there, so that's not my address. But she started with me there, and the garage honestly is smaller than this room. I couldn't even fit a full weightlifting platform in it. I had to cut off the end of the weightlifting platform to make it fit. I had one pull-up bar, 1 or 2 barbells, maybe 200 pounds of weights, 2 boxes, 2 tires, and a couple kettlebells. and I thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So what I did was I had classes at 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. I'd leave, I'd go work an 8-hour day at MediFit, and then I'd have classes in the evening in the gym. And that's what I did. And in the weekends, we'd have more classes. And the gym got rolling at my house, so we had about 10 members. And once we had 10 members, I was on my way to work, and I was driving down Moody Street, and I saw a sign out front, and I was like, I'll call that number and see if I can rent a unit. So I came in, I looked at the unit, and it was half of one bay. It was half of a bay that was like a warehouse space, and the front half was offices. So for $1,200 a month, I was in, and I had a spot. So I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. And with the offices, one of the offices turned into our equipment room. One office turned into where all of our rowers were going to be. In the back half, we didn't have a pull-up rig. That was before Rogue was even making pull-up rigs.
Wow.
I had a plumbing pipe that ran across from wall to wall with some 2x4x8 posts that I put up, drilled it through, and hung up this like pull-up rig. And it was awesome. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I didn't even have enough money to have flooring. So we had a cement floor, a couple weightlifting platforms, a makeshift pull-up rig, and I think at that point I was 24 years old, and I thought it was the coolest shit ever.
Yeah.
I was like, this is awesome. I have my own spot. But even at that point, I was still working full-time at MediFit, full-time, my own spot.
What were you charging for memberships back then?
Honestly, it wasn't even that different. I think it was like $150 a month.
Okay.
And I was charging $150 a month out of my garage.
Yeah.
And I was amazed that people would show up and pay me. And I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I need 10 people and I'll pay my mortgage every month. Like,
Yeah.
this is awesome. I mean, our rate's up to our unlimited rate now is $175 a month. We do a lot of other stuff with personal training and stuff like that. But I mean, if I think about what I offered in 2009 compared to what I offer in 2019, the facility, the equipment, the experience, the coaching, everything,
Yeah.
it's crazy how different it is.
Well, plus just inflation.
Yeah, inflation.
10 years later.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's probably cheaper technically dollar for dollar now.
Yeah, 100%. Especially with the services that we're offering and stuff. It's really cool. So we were here December of December of 2000. So I was only in the garage at home for like a month and a half. So like January of 2010, we moved into here. 1.5 bay, and I think we were there for about a year or so, and then there was a gymnastics place next door that was moving out. So I approached my landlord and I was like, hey, can we rip down the wall between the two and I can take over both? And he was like, yep, sounds great. So I ended up ripping down the wall and we had 2 bays. That second bay is actually like the bay now that all of our rowers are in, and like the far wall where the GHDs are and stuff. That was that bay, and there was a hole in the wall that went into the other bay. So it was like an L. It was like a big L shape. That was 2011, because that was the first year we had the Misfit toys, right? No, 2010, because that was the first year we had the Misfit toys. So things were moving pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I decided that at that point I was going to work part-time at MediFit and full-time here, to the point where I was working so many classes and so many hours here where I had to quit there. And I was really, really fortunate that I have a wife that was like, hey, listen, I'll pay the mortgage, I'll cover the bills, whatever money you make from the gym, pour it back into the gym and just try to grow it and make something of it. So Kate really is the one that allowed me to do what I was doing and like allowed the gym to grow and become what it is. And then, I mean, from there, the 2 bays over here that we're in now, so we're in 3 bays now, but the 2 that we moved into used to be a battery charging business. So they would like go into big places that had like forklifts that operate off batteries and they would charge them. I don't know, I've never heard of a business like that, and they went out of business.
Yeah.
So I ended up approaching Dennis again, our landlord, and ripping down another wall, moving into that, and then we've been in this space now like it is for probably 6 years, 7 years.
Wow.
And then it's just been accumulation of equipment, and I'm kind of an equipment junkie, as a lot of you guys can tell, where I pick up barbells left and right, or new racks, or I just like all that kind of stuff, or different like how many specialty barbells do we have out there between axles or that ox bar, or just different bars that we have, the trap bar. I mean, just a bunch of different stuff. And at a certain point, I think it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Kate and I were able to make that trade where she stopped teaching. She moved into social work, took a reduction in pay, but the gym was doing well enough where I could step up and be
Yeah.
like, hey, I'll cover the mortgage. And then it got to the point where that wasn't working out for her, so she left her job and started working for the gym and doing what she does now. I mean, at that point, social media wasn't as big of a front. We weren't doing nearly as much, where her role in the gym is huge now with pretty much every piece of material that people see put out there, she put out there. Maybe you made the video, but she's the person that on my side uploaded it and linked it and hashtagged it and did all that kind of stuff.
Wrote all the descriptions.
Yeah, and all that. And so all of our posts every day that are on Instagram or Facebook, that's all her. Every piece of paper, I guess, that we have has always been, or every email is proofread through her. I mean, she was an English major and English teacher, so she's a great person to do that because, as I said earlier, I wasn't quite the academic.
Yeah.
So reading and writing aren't my strong suit. I like to bang weights and teach people how to do that.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of the story of the gym. I mean, and from there it's just grown. And I'm super fortunate for the people that we've been introduced to through the gym, the people that have come in our doors, being able to have my kids here with me every day and have them come in and see us work hard and see what hard work looks like and see that the gym can be fun and the physical activity isn't something that's negative or done for a specific body image. It's done because you enjoy it. And it's fun to be strong and run and play and swing and jump. And like, that's awesome because there's not a lot of people that can do that. Most people, they leave in the morning, they go to work all day and they come home at night and they see their family. I get to see my family almost all day, every day, which is a huge benefit of what I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. I mean, it's been cool to be a part of the gym. For me, I first came in here July of last year, I guess, so like a year and a half ago at this point, and it's just been cool to be a part of. I guess I'll like share the relatively shorter version of my story. I was not super athletic when I was younger, like played outside a lot. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and we were all homeschooled. Grew up in upstate New York, and so we just like spent a lot of time in the yard. I think mainly because our mom was worried we'd like destroy each other otherwise, which we did. There were a lot of emergency room trips when we were little.
I'm sure there was. With 6 kids, that's super busy.
Well, in the first 3 of us, so it's me, my brother Ryan, then my brother Tate, there was like 14-month gaps in between each of us. And so like the 3 of us were just like daredevils with each other, where like I don't know, I was probably like 3 or 4. At one point we pulled all the cushions off all the like couches and chairs in the living room and made like a trampoline.
Sure.
Fell, I ate it on like the edge of the couch on the frame, and my tooth came out my lip. Like I lost a tooth and put a hole through my lip and had to get stitches and stuff. I mean, we had so many of those. Like my brother, we were swim racing in the pool, and my brother caught a knee under his eye and had to get stitches under his eye. We were just, my mom always says that we fried all her nerves in like the first 3 years, and then she couldn't get freaked out after that. But we weren't really like athletic though. Like my parents are both more on the, I guess they're more book smart. My dad was a dentist and worked all the time, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but neither of them had like significant athletic backgrounds. And so it just wasn't a part of our culture either. Like we didn't really watch football or anything. Like we just did whatever we did. And so it wasn't really until middle school, I guess, we moved to Massachusetts from upstate New York when I was 11. And that's around when I started playing baseball. Played baseball for a few years. But like it was also one of those things where I very quickly felt like, oh, like these kids have done this. Like there are people here who are like coaches' kids who are good at this, and I'm just like coming in on it. And so I was never like a star player. I was always the like kid who would win most improved. Okay. Like literally our coaches would give out awards every year, and I'm pretty sure every year I played baseball in Hamden, Massachusetts, I won the most improved player thing. Because it was like, I don't want to be bad, but I'm not good, and I'm just going to get better in whatever way I can. And that's sort of like a big, I guess, like theme for me in general. There's this sort of like personality test thing called the Enneagram that has 9 types, and like I am a intense 3, which is an achiever, and it's like the need of the 3 is to achieve, and that's
Okay.
very much like for me when I look back through my life, it's like, oh yeah, like I don't know if it's like oldest child syndrome, if it's whatever else it may be, but like I have always wanted to be good at things. And
Yeah.
so like even coming into baseball not being good at it, it was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out to the best degree I can. Around that time is also when my parents separated, which is only really relevant because like being the oldest of 6 kids and then like all being homeschooled and having my parents separated, like everything just got really crazy.
Sure.
So that was when like I ended up quitting baseball as I was going into high school because it was like it's like practices and games every day, and like mom's so busy like taking care of kids and divorce stuff, and dad's
Sure.
not around, and so that was when I quit baseball and just sort of like got deep into living on the internet and probably being moderately depressed, and ended up playing lots of video games and slowly found my way around to like Photoshop and stuff. I've been really
Sure.
into art when I was younger, so I thought I was going to be an artist.
Well, you pretty much are.
I mean, to a
In
degree.
different- yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all dependent on, I mean, how you define that, right?
Right. But so I thought I was going to be like an art artist, but I was always really bad at art. I was just really into it. But so like it was funny because I sort of like found Photoshop, and Photoshop for me was finally the world where like I could create things that I had been envisioning that I never had the like manual dexterity or patience to like draw or paint or anything. And so I really fell into like the digital art world more so than like illustration. It was a lot more of like, I guess what you would consider like if you think of like a 5 gum billboard and it's just like a crazy looking thing that obviously isn't real, like making that sort of stuff I was really good at. So I started teaching myself that. That was sort of the big upside of being homeschooled and having separated parents, was it really just meant like a lot of free time to do whatever you wanted.
Sure.
Because there wasn't a ton of oversight. And so I spent a lot of time learning that sort of stuff. And at some point I ended up finding like mixed martial arts of all things, I think through like another friend group, and got really into it and started training that for a while. And it was another case of just like, I think I probably only did it for a year or something, if that, but like just got really good at it really fast.
That plays into your achiever.
Yeah, and it was just like I was obsessive about it, where I was like up finding YouTube videos and like a lot of stuff where I was like always doing extracurricular work. I was in at classes, and we'd be rolling, and I'd be like hitting stuff that the coach was like, "Where did you even learn that?" And I was like, "Oh, online."
That sounds very similar to now.
Yeah, exactly. Back when I was 15, I was still doing that. So it was another thing that like I never really like stuck with long enough to be really, really good at, but I did well in the short period of time that I did it. And I think it was the first really like mentally and physically tough thing I did, where like they definitely pushed us to those points of like, I can't do this anymore. And they're like, no, you can keep doing this. And just sort of like started building up some of that, pain tolerance and just realization that your body lies to you a lot and all that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So came out of that and met another family with a bunch of kids basically, and ended up becoming really good friends with one of them. And they were a big wrestling family. So they were like generations of wrestlers and gym owners. And so
Sure.
they were big into powerlifting and wrestling. And like I had been to the gym before, but that was really when my like foray into powerlifting started, I guess. And so my friend, their basement, they had like a whole home gym in their basement. And so we would go over there like 3 or 4 days a week, and we would just lift together. And then it was sort of after lifting with him for a while, it was probably like 6 or 8 months. Like I got strong for what it was at the time, and I was probably 17-ish around this time. But he sort of started trying to talk me into wrestling, and I was like, I don't really have any experience with wrestling. Like, it's the opposite of the like submission grappling stuff I've been doing. But he talked me into it, so I tried wrestling. I wrestled for 1 year. It it was my senior year of high school, even though I'd functionally sort of graduated early. And so wrestled, and the experience there was, it was right at the end of us sort of doing that first like powerlifting cycle where, because I remember I was like 215 at the time. After we'd been lifting, I'd put on some weight and joined the Minnetonka wrestling team, and they were like, okay, I very quickly realized that I was like, so the captain weighs 215, so I'm not wrestling at 215.
Sure.
And so it was like, well, I can either try to wrestle off the like 270 heavyweight guy, or I can try to cut to 189.
Okay.
And so I decided to cut to 189. And that's probably like, of the crazy things that I've done out of just like pure, really just like ego and achieverness, that was probably the craziest one, because I basically had like 5 weeks to go from 215 to 189, and I did it.
Wow.
I killed myself. Where I was doing 2-a-days and not eating anything, basically. Like, I didn't have any plans, so it's just like, we'll just run the biggest caloric deficit we can, dehydrate ourselves as much as possible, and we're going to hit weight.
And I made it.
I did. I mean, it was miserable. I remember like sleeping in trash bags and doing jumping jacks in the sauna, and just like your nose is burning and you feel like garbage. I mean, and then you have to go in and wrestle like every day and you feel like garbage. It was total insanity. But so it was funny because, again, it's all crazy. Like, in hindsight, like, I had no background in wrestling. I picked it up quickly and, like, again, got good enough at it that, like, I could have made varsity.
Sure.
But so my, like, final window before they sort of, like, went into the playoffs or whatever they sort of call it was, like, I had, like, 2 weeks. I hit weight, like, right before that 2-week window. And then I had to wrestle off the other 189 kid.
Sure.
Which is also, like, in hindsight, sort of a, like, crazy move, because this kid's probably been wrestling for 3-4 years. I come in never having wrestled before, cut 40 pounds, and, like, I want to wrestle you off and take our team through, you know, Western Mass and everything. And so it's a best 2 out of 3 wrestle off. He won the first one. I won the second one. He won the third one. Wow. And so that was the end of my season, basically, though. And I was devastated.
Sure.
Because it was like, I just cut all this weight for, like, no good reason now. Because I didn't get a regular season varsity wrestling match at all. Like, I wrestled a ton that season, but didn't end up wrestling varsity. So Jake, my friend, was like, you should come wrestle with us at Northeast Elite, which is used to be in Enfield. I don't know what happened to it at this point, but it was like an off-season wrestling club. Went over and wrestled there for a few months, and somehow, again, just like craziness of it all, got asked to go wrestle for them at the it was called Pop and Flow Nationals at Lake Placid. They call it like the Miracle on the Mat. They do it in the hockey arena there, where like the Miracle on Ice happened. But so I had to go to this national level like wrestling tournament. Again, never having had an actual like varsity match under my belt, which was just another crazy thing. I mean, I got wrecked, but I did exactly what I was supposed to do, which is don't get pinned and just like save points as much as you can.
Sure.
But I mean, I was wrestling like Ohio State champions and stuff who have been wrestling since they were 3, and
That's
like
awesome, though.
it was
Talk
just
about an
crazy.
experience.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was super fun, and it's like, you know, at the end of the day, even if it was just like I was the only kid that filled a weight slot, and you know, coach needed someone to show up, like it still was just another like chance to take a big shot on a very quick learning curve, I guess. And so like I was done with wrestling at that point, and that was right around when I ended up moving to the Cape. So I moved to Cape Cod, and like the other thing in there, I guess, was that I was trying to figure out what to do with like college and whatever. Thought about going to Full Sail in Orlando for like digital art graphic design, because they had a 2-year bachelor program.
Sure.
So I applied actually when I was 16, because that was when I sort of like officially finished the homeschooled high school thing, and got approved, and just ended up being like, honestly, part of it was that I didn't really feel comfortable like leaving my family, because everything was still a little bit crazy, and part of it was like $100,000 of debt didn't really sound great, and so I was like, I'm just gonna not do that right now. So that's when I went to wrestle, and then after wrestling, pretty quickly, that was where I ended up sort of with this opportunity where I moved to the Cape, and part of that was right around my 18th birthday was when my parents' divorce finally got finalized. So it was like a 7-year thing.
Yeah, that's a big span.
Yeah, it was a mess, but by the time it sort of got like locked down, that it was like literally right around when I was considering this Cape thing, and I got the call. It was like, hey, this is all done, and that was sort of like, okay, like I'm at least comfortable going to the Cape, like because now I'm still within reach, but you know I can do my own thing a little bit more now because this is all a little more settled down. So I ended up on the Cape and was mostly doing like art and music stuff down there still, like a lot of digital art, design, illustration type stuff. And that's really where I fell into photo and video because I was interning at a church there and sort of an opportunity popped up to screw around with that. And it was just like very quickly thrown into the deep end of like made a video for fun with some friends. Someone saw it and was like, hey, would you want to do all these videos for our like Christmas program at the church or whatever? And I was like, I don't have any idea what I'm doing, but sure. And so just sort of figured it out and ended up getting a camera for Christmas, like a DSLR type thing. Took that down a few weeks later to this like conference in Atlanta that was like, it was sort of focused on like human trafficking, and it was like a lot of college kids. But there was something like 50,000 college kids in the Georgia Dome. And so I had my camera and just still sort of figuring it out. And one night they do this like candlelight vigil thing outside. They built this crazy thing out in front of the stadium that was like all made out of trafficked goods basically, and was all sort of supposed to like raise awareness. Because human trafficking is huge in Atlanta too, and so that's part of why it was a big thing there. But anyway, so I ended up filming this like candlelight thing they did with all these kids, and I like edited it in a trial of Premiere on the way home from the event because we drove up and down. Put it up on YouTube, and I don't even know how it like got out anywhere, but it was, I forget, it had like 15,000 views in like 2 or 3 days.
That's huge.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's compared to like a lot of numbers. It's not huge, but for someone who'd never put anything out publicly before, it was big.
Yeah, your first video you've ever put on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like, YouTube's not even big at that point, and you get 15,000 views in 3 days.
Yeah,
Wow.
and like, I think like CNN Atlanta ended up sharing it and stuff or something, because it was
Very
like,
cool.
and part of it was just right place, right time, because it was like, the event ended up putting out videos, but they took longer to turn them around. And so mine was like the first thing that got out there that looked halfway decent. And so that was like, I guess when I think in hindsight, like that was my marking point of like, okay, I'm going to like keep trying to figure this out.
Absolutely.
So I came back and had this sort of one hit, but still had no clue what I was doing. You know, had no real training, had no experience, had very little equipment. And so just started from the ground up with like still doing church videos, doing like event videos. I did some like recap and promo videos for like this winter camp and summer camp, and that led to me getting invited to go to Haiti with a nonprofit. Ended up going to Haiti 3 times with them and doing some like documentary work and stuff. And sort of it was just like this little trickle of doors kept opening to then, you know, I did weddings for a while and then quickly got burnt out by weddings. And at some point I sort of decided to like focus on video more so than photo, where I was doing photo a lot early on, even just like engagement photos and senior photos and all that sort of stuff. And I just really like enjoyed the process of video. And so that was what I ended up leaning into, to the point that now I don't really get hired for photos, which is sort of a funny thing. So if anyone wants photos, they should probably hire my wife. But yeah, so ended up doing that and just sort of started chasing that. And again, I think sort of that achiever thing coming back was just like, I never had this like vision of being a filmmaker or anything. I thought I was going to be an artist or whatever else. And so when I sort of fell into this and it was like, oh, it's art and tech, and I like really like art and tech, and there's like a people aspect of it. It's like all these things that I like bundled together, and it doesn't like break me too much on any one part of it. Like the business part of it was probably the hardest part for me getting started, just like charging for anything or like asserting value. And in some ways can still be the hardest part for me, in that like I'm probably overly transparent with people sometimes. I'm not good at playing hardball.
But I mean, it's similar with me and similar with you. Like, you got into your field because you liked
Yeah.
You wanted to be an artist. You were a high achiever. Like, things fell into place. I got into this field because I liked lifting weights and I liked helping people get strong. I never thought about the business side.
Right.
Until all of a sudden you're like, oh, if I want to make a living doing this, I got to get really good at this really fast.
Right. Well, and that was one of those things where, like, starting out, so when I moved to the Cape, I was sort of like interning at this church, and I was working part-time at Marshall's and part-time at Ace Hardware. And I quit the Ace Hardware job pretty quick, but was still working at Marshall's. And then it was right around when that first video sort of went big on YouTube that I was like, I'm just going to try and figure this out. And then, you know, as like the 18-year-old kid who has no overhead, I was like living in a friend's basement for next to nothing, and just really low overhead, that when they're like, hey, we'll give you like $150 to take photos. And I was like, that's more than I made in like 3 days at Marshall's, so I'll take it, you know?
Right. Sounds great.
Yeah, if I can string a few of these together, I'll at least, you know, beat the minimum wage job I was doing before. But I think at that point it was more like, how can I like pay the bills doing this? But more so than like, oh, I want to turn this into a business. It was like, I just really want to get better at this, and I can sort of like do this instead of the like Marshall's thing. And so that was where like, oh, I'll just like squeeze in some photo shoots and weddings and whatever. And then I think that sort of slowly morphed into like, what's the biggest and best way to do this, and just sort of like chasing that rabbit of like, what's the next bigger and better thing. And I do think that's something that like I sort of inadvertently did well, was like I never settled anywhere. Like I never let myself like get really comfortable in weddings and like do 5 years of just like really dialing in a wedding business model or something. Like I did it, I got good at it, and then I sort of got sick of it and went on to the next thing. And I feel like I did a decent job of sort of pivoting through those spaces. But so like this whole time, fitness was relatively sidelined for me, because it was like I had come out of wrestling right into living on the Cape. So that's the last time that I was in like pretty good shape, because I was like 190 something.
So I was going to ask, when you went up to that the tournament in Lake Placid, what weight class did you wrestle at there?
So I had bumped back up to like 190 something.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, I don't remember exactly what the numbers ended up being, but it was like, when I got asked about that tournament, they asked if I could wrestle at like 193 or something, which wasn't like a big cut, but it was like a little bit of a cut. So I ended up spending like a week or two doing the like wrestler thing and just sucking water weight again. And I remember the night before we left for Lake Placid, the coach calls me and he goes, hey, whatever, change of plans, you're gonna wrestle at 216 tomorrow. And I was like, you're kidding me, man. Like I just cut weight for nothing again. Which is also part of where like just not getting pinned at Lake Placid was great, because I'm a weight class down against like all these killer kids, and
hardly any experience compared to anybody.
Yeah.
And you're also dehydrated, super light going into this huge tournament.
Yeah, it was just survival mode. But yeah, so when I moved to the Cape, I was like 195 or whatever. It was in pretty good shape. I like had a pull-up bar in the basement and stuff, but wasn't really moving consistently. And long story short, just sort of like really put my head down on the filmmaking front, and ended up sort of like networking, doing a lot of social media stuff. I started this Facebook group, which was originally like me and 20 high school kids who wanted to learn more about what I did, and ended up turning into like a 3,000 or 4,000 member Facebook group of filmmakers all over the world. I had a podcast, and we had like the cinematographers from Star Wars Rogue One and Han Solo and all this stuff on there. Like it got pretty big. And I was just like traveling, working for ESPN, flying all the time. And I sort of, I got on the money train hard, I think is part of what it was, where it was like the checks started getting bigger, and I just like lost all ability to say no to anything, because it turns into like, oh, well, if you want to give me like a couple $1,000 to go here for this day, like, yeah, it's like my, wife's brother's birthday party, but like he wouldn't say no, you know? And so I quickly hit a point of just like steamrolling every other aspect of my life to just like go say yes and sort of like collect all the film Pokemon that I could, and got a lot of cool opportunities out of it, and like got to work on some really cool stuff, but just like sort of destroyed myself in the process. Not sleeping well, not on any sort of routine, had no physical fitness routine. My diet was out the window. You're just sort of like slamming Dunkin' sandwiches at 5 a.m. in the airport, and then like eating pasta at the end of the day. And it's like, it wasn't a good place to be, and I was just like burnt out, overworked. My relationships with my wife and friends were really getting on the rocks and stuff, and so
Sure.
I ended up sort of like really pulling the plug on everything, where I shut down my podcast, shut down the Facebook group, shut down. I was doing like the Patreon thing and doing a lot of like paid content type stuff with educational stuff. I took like a month off work hard initially, but it was going like right into slow season. And so I just sort of like really tried to reset everything and take a hard look, and at that point I was like right around 260.
Really?
And so I just like slipped way out of it all. And that was really when I started to turn things around, and it started with just like starting to run again and got back into the Globo gym. And then, we moved to Enfield and was still back in the Globo gym and was sort of just like tired and bored of it, and somehow fell into CrossFit on YouTube. Really, I guess like I found like the Road to the Games docs or whatever, and like started watching that stuff, and I was like, this looks really fun. Like I had always been one of those people who made fun of CrossFit, honestly, because it was just like coming from a wrestling, powerlifting background. It's like, oh, you get hurt and do crazy stuff, and it's all sledgehammers and tire flips, and watching more of the game stuff, I was like, oh, this seems like the kind of thing I would really be into. Partially because there's a lot of things to get good at, and I like getting good at stuff.
Absolutely.
But so that was where I ended up Googling Enfield CrossFit. Romeo Athletics came up, and I showed up one day and was like, hey. And yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what happened right there. I don't know if that was when we did the first workout and you just totally blew me up or what, but I was like, okay, this sounds like fun.
This seems cool.
Yeah.
To rewind 1 second, do
Yeah.
you feel like you had to go through like the grind of like taking every job, hopping around every plane to get yourself in a place where you could pull back a little bit and be successful still?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like since then I've sort of gone through and continue to go through, honestly, like different work on like addiction recovery and stuff, because I think I would personally say that I think I had a real, like at the peak of everything, I had a real like social media addiction to the point that it was just really bad. And they say that like pretty much for most people who suffer addictive behavior, like you have to hit rock bottom to actually want to do anything about it.
Okay.
And I think for me that combined like just all those pieces sort of like sludging into this brick wall at the same time of me just going like, at the end of the day, it was really just like, I'm miserable. Like I have and again, this is like as a, at the time, 23-year-old kid who, lives in Chicopee, Massachusetts, and came from, a separated family and whatever else. Like, I wasn't loaded, but I was like, I have more money than I know what to do with, and I have more attention than I ever expected at this point in my life, and I hate all of it.
Really?
Like, I'm just miserable. And I think that was really where I was like, no amount of like Apple commercials and, million view YouTube videos and whatever else and making a bunch of money in a month and flying around is changing the fact that I just like am miserable. And so that was where it really was like, okay, I have to go back to sort of ground zero and go like, what do I care about? And like my health was something I cared about. My relationships were something I cared about. And like doing something I love was something I cared about. So I like didn't just totally throw the baby out with the bathwater and the filmmaking thing. But it was like, at the end of the day, I don't care about like making more money than I need to in a given month just because I can. And some of that was even just like, I think it made me realize even like little lifestyle changes where it was like, and it's all sort of this like selfish, self-centered lifestyle of just like, I make money and then I like buy Adidas sneakers I don't need with money that I have. And it was like the little changes of like, oh, if I just like stop buying that stuff, then I like don't need the money and then I can say no to the job and then I just like stay here and everything's fine. Sure. And so it sort of like forced me to reassess everything, where I think really what had happened is like I fell into this thing and it very quickly ballooned and I just never had any like real goals, intentions, checks and balances. I just sort of like kept pulling on this string and more kept coming, know? And so, and then next thing you know, you're like, okay, where am I? I have to like reassess where I am. What am I doing? What do I want to do? What do I really care about? Because I'd really just been taking like the path of least resistance at the end of the day. It's like, what's the easiest thing to do that's going to get better? And so just keep chasing things getting better. So yeah, I sometimes like wonder like honestly, I think getting married was a big part of that for me because like there's a lot of natural friction that occurs relationally with that, and I wonder if like if I didn't have Mandy in my life and there wasn't a lot of friction, how long I would have just not even realized that
Just
I was
kept
miserable.
going.
Yeah, like I just would have done it. I
Yeah.
just would have gone and gone and gone, and maybe it would have still corrected and it would have ended up great, or maybe I would have like died of a cocaine bender
Sure.
in New York with some
Shit
crazy
got
producers.
crazy,
Yeah.
and
Because
who
that's how a
knows
lot of
what.
those people end up, and I, to a certain point, I empathize with that, where it's like you just keep chasing this thing, and it's like you're always going for the next hit, and then, next thing you know, who knows, it's hookers and blow or whatever else. But I never got to that point, but I see how it would happen.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And I was just curious because I know with like growing the gym, I had to put in 70, 80, 100-hour weeks to get it up and running and
Right.
run every single class and do every single intro and meet with every single person. And to get my business to the point where it is, I had to do that for years and years. I just didn't know if that was similar with your
Yeah.
line of work of like you had to work all the hours and take all the jobs to build your name up, to get your reputation, to get the deals. So then when you started seeing like, this isn't making me happy.
Yeah.
I need to pull back. At least you made those connections where people were still seeking you out.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it too, if I were to be like really honest about it, I think part of it was that it wasn't necessarily just grinding so much as a lot of it was like there was a good amount of grinding, but there was a lot of just like really ineffective uses of time too. And so that was where like, especially as all this side stuff started hustling up, where it was like, I may have only been working like 30 hours a week, but I was like YouTubing, podcasting, Facebook group managing 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
And that was not making me enough money to justify the time it was taking.
Sure. So when you're looking at that, that's 110 hours a week that you're busy with your career, where, as you said, relationships are falling out the window and
Right.
what's going on.
Right. And my health is just tanking, or, I'm like stressed and I'm not good at dealing with stress. So I'm like up at 2 a.m. playing Fortnite and just like could be going to the gym, could be doing anything physically active, but
Yeah.
just again had just sort of chased all these things and not really like put checks and balances or good even like coping mechanisms in some ways in there to give myself enough bandwidth. So I would get burnt out, and instead of having anything healthy to lean into, it's like I have 16 things to do in the next 4 days, and I'm going from like the number of like back to back travel jobs I did. That was like, I'm going to go straight from San Francisco to Arizona, from Arizona to San Diego, from San Diego to Chicago, Chicago to Nashville. And then I'll come home like 2 weeks from now. And just like all of those are different jobs that require different gear and logistics. And so it was like, well, I have to start packing for that tomorrow. I'm just going to like get a 6-pack and play video games and pass out at some point.
And it is what it is.
Yeah, and then I'll figure it out tomorrow, Evan's problem. Like, which is, it's just crazy, but like that's what I was doing. And so that was what really led me to burnout and led me to trying to get back into something, which led me back here. The one other thing I did mean to mention, because it was funny when you said that, is that like when Mandy and I met, so we met shortly after I started the film stuff. So at this point, it would have been like 7 years ago, I guess.
Okay.
And we met. She was teaching full time. She's older than me. And so at the time, I think she was 25 and I was 19 when we met.
Okay.
She'd been teaching for a few years already, had her master's, whatever. I, had just recently sort of quit my part-time jobs and was figuring out this photo video thing full time. But we ended up sort of, texting for a while because I lived on the Cape, and then I moved back from the Cape, and that was when we started dating, and then ended up getting married. But even at the point where we got married, I was still sort of like figuring it out, where like it worked, but it wasn't gonna like carry both of us or anything.
Sure.
And she was teaching full time. And then I think it was about 2 years into us being married that she ended up sort of getting like totally burnt out on teaching and had an opportunity to take a step back from that. And that was right around when sort of everything for me really like bumped up a step financially. And so we were able to do that same pivot where we always joked that like, she's like, you can never say that I married you because you were successful, because you were like hot garbage when we met, but somehow it's flipped around. And so, and she does all sorts of awesome stuff now. But yeah, it was just funny to have that similar sort of like someone who's willing to support you and let you put the time and money into it to figure it out, and then hopefully we get to repay the favor with some freedom on the backside for them. But
absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I mean,
That's
there's
a really interesting story, though. It's really cool.
I feel like it's a dramatic story. It's less about my journey with athletics, I guess, and more about landing here.
But it all comes full circle to a lot of stuff that you were mentioning through there of being a high achiever, being like almost somewhat of an addictive personality.
Yeah.
You were talking about like when you found martial arts, of like how you treated that in terms of how you treat your fitness now, of being like, I know what we do in classes, but I can research a bunch of stuff and figure out what else I can do too.
Yeah.
I mean, it all fits into the model of you finding fitness and where your fitness journey has led you and your health and wellness journey. I mean, I find it interesting.
Yeah, so it should be cool, and I'm curious to hear other people's stories, sort of going forward with this, and just to, I think different people have different experiences. Obviously, there are people who you see in here who like go through their own really significant transformations, and I would be curious just to hear more of like what got them to a point where they wanted to make a big change or whatever else it may be. And then there's other guys who come in and are, fireballs right off the shot with their athletic backgrounds, and so it should be interesting to talk to people, but I don't know how many people are still listening at this point. We're an hour into these stories, but I think, what am I trying to say? Well, we should probably tail this off about now, but hopefully we're gonna keep doing it is the plan. So if you've listened this far and if you thought this was interesting, let us know, and if we should keep doing it, let us know. But two, we're gonna start having guests come on here, and we're gonna have to figure out how that works with scheduling people and whatever. But I think the general idea is that like if you like this and hear anything that you like or don't like, feel free to let us know, because it's very much a liquid thing as we figure out sort of how much we talk about fitness and gym goings on versus just talking to other people. Like, do you care more about people's stories, or do you want us to talk about Misfit Toys and a half marathon row?
Oh yeah, bring up topics. If people want to hear specific topics, if they're like, hey, talk more about nutrition, or talk more about specific movement selections, or why we're doing whatever we're doing, or the charity work that we do, because we do a lot of charity work.
Yeah, for sure.
Bring it up. Shoot us an email, shoot us a text message, whatever it may be. Bring it up in the gym, and I will be happy to jam with it, or even bring you on with your questions, and you can ask us live on air, and hopefully I'll come up with some good answers, and hopefully Evan will too.
No, I'm just here to facilitate, but yeah, it should be fun. So anyways, thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next time.
Sounds good. Bye.